Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time to the Middle Ages, a period where life was anything but easy. Imagine waking up in a small, dark hut with an earthen floor, the air thick with the smell of smoke and livestock. Your bed is a lumpy straw mattress, and as you open your eyes, you realize that surviving even 24 hours here is going to be a challenge. You probably won't last a day in this world, where every moment is a struggle for survival. From the moment you wake up to the time you lay your head down at night, life is hard, dirty, and dangerous. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel grow and brings more content like this to you. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop it in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see how our community spans the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you lie there in the pre-dawn darkness, the first thing you notice is the chill in the air. The fire in the central hearth has died down to embers, and the room feels cold, almost damp. You can hear the soft breathing of your family members sleeping nearby, their forms barely visible in the dim light. There's also the occasional rustle of the animals sharing your home, a couple of chickens clucking softly, maybe a goat shifting in the corner, kept inside to protect them from foxes or wolves that might roam the night. This is your reality now, and it's a far cry from the cozy bedroom you're used to. You sit up, rubbing your eyes, and take a moment to adjust. The hut is small, its walls made of wattle and daub sticks woven together and plastered with mud. Not exactly the sturdy drywall of your modern home. The roof is thatched with straw, which does a decent job keeping out the rain but lets in drafts that make you shiver. There are no windows, just a small opening near the roof to let the smoke from the hearth escape. Though it doesn't do much to clear the air, the floor beneath your feet is packed dirt, uneven and cold, with bits of straw scattered around from your bed. Your bed, by the way, is nothing like the memory foam mattress you might be dreaming of right now. It's a simple straw mattress laid directly on the floor, covered with a rough woolen blanket that scratches more than it comforts. You're used to waking up with aches and pains, and, if you're lucky, you haven't picked up any new bites from the bugs that call your bed home. Bed bugs and lice were just part of the deal in medieval times. Think of them as uninvited roommates who never pay rent. As you get up, you move carefully to avoid waking the others. Your family shares this single room, your parents, maybe a sibling or two, all huddled together for warmth. Privacy is a concept that doesn't exist here. You share everything: space, food, even the air, thick with the smell of smoke and unwashed bodies. It's not exactly the spa-like atmosphere you might be craving, but it's home. You make your way to the door, stepping over the sleeping forms and dodging a chicken that's decided to wander into your path. Outside, the village is just starting to stir. The sky is beginning to lighten, a soft gray creeping over the horizon, and you hear the roosters crowing, nature's alarm clock that doesn't come with a snooze button. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the faint tang of manure from the fields nearby. Your village is small, a cluster of maybe a dozen huts like yours, arranged around a central area with a well and a small open space that serves as a market square on busier days. Beyond the huts stretch the fields, divided into strips where each family grows their crops: rye, oats, peas, and barley, the staples that keep you alive. In the distance, you can see the manor house, where the lord of the manor lives. Its wooden or stone walls a stark contrast to your humble hut. There's also the church, a simple stone building with a thatched roof. Its bell silent for now, but ready to call everyone to Mass on Sunday. Life here is governed by the feudal system, a rigid hierarchy that keeps everyone in their place. At the top is the king, who grants land to nobles in exchange for loyalty and military service. The nobles pass portions of their land to knights, who offer protection. And at the bottom are the peasants, people like you, making up about 90% of medieval Europe's population. You're likely a serf, bound to the land, unable to leave without the Lord's permission. In return for a small plot to farm for yourself, you work the Lord's fields several days a week and hand over a share of your harvest. It's a deal that keeps you alive, but only just. It's May, and the fields are turning green with new growth, a sign of hope, but also a reminder of the work ahead. Spring means plowing and planting, long days under the sun to ensure there's enough food for the coming year. You stand outside your hut, taking in the scene, and feel a mix of resignation and determination. This is your life, and you've got to make it work, even if it feels like the odds are stacked against you. As you look around, you see other peasants emerging from their huts, stretching and yawning as they prepare for the day. Children are already playing in the dirt, their laughter a rare bright spot in the morning. Women are fetching water from the well, or tending to small gardens near their homes, growing herbs or vegetables to supplement the meager diet. The village is small, but there's a sense of community here, born out of necessity. You all rely on each other to survive, whether it's sharing tools, helping with the harvest, or keeping an eye out for trouble. In the distance, you spot a swineherd leading a group of pigs toward the forest, their snouts sniffing the ground as they head out to forage. Pigs are a big deal in medieval times, their meat a valuable source of food for the winter months. Letting them roam the forest to eat acorns and beechnuts, a practice called pannage, is a common way to fatten them up without spending precious grain. In fact, the right to let pigs graze in certain woodlands was so important that it was carefully guarded, almost like a medieval version of a VIP pass. Too bad you don't get any special perks for sleeping on a straw mattress that's more bug than bed. The Middle Ages, spanning roughly from the 5th to the 15th century, were a time of survival, where every day was a battle against hunger, disease, and the elements. For you, a peasant, life revolves around the agrarian calendar, planting in spring, tending crops in summer, harvesting in fall, and praying you've stored enough to make it through winter. It's a cycle that defines your existence, with little room for the comforts you're used to in the modern world. No electricity, no running water, no Wi-Fi to scroll through when you're bored. Instead, your entertainment is the occasional story told by the fire or the rare festival that breaks up the monotony. But don't let the simplicity fool you. Life here is anything but easy. The lack of sanitation, the constant threat of crop failure, and the ever-present risk of illness make every day a gamble. Over the next sections, we'll follow you through a typical day in this medieval world, from your morning routine to your evening rest. exploring why surviving even 24 hours would be a challenge for someone used to modern comforts. So, let's start with where you live your home, or rather, the hut you call home. You step back inside your hut, the creak of the wooden door echoing in the quiet morning. Remember that smoky air from earlier. It's even thicker now as you move deeper into the single-room space you call home. The faint glow of dawn filters through the small opening near the roof, but it does little to brighten the dim interior. This is where you live, eat, and sleep, alongside your family and a few animals who are probably better at surviving this than you are. If you're thinking of your cozy apartment or air-conditioned house right now, well, brace yourself. This is about as far from that as you can get. Your hut is a simple structure, maybe 15 by 20 feet, built with wattle and daub sticks woven together like a giant basket and slathered with a mix of mud, straw, and whatever else was handy. The walls are sturdy enough to keep out the worst of the wind, but they're far from airtight. Drafts slip through cracks, and the occasional drip from last night's rain reminds you that the thatched roof above isn't exactly waterproof. That roof, made of bundled straw or reeds, is a fire hazard waiting to happen, but it's all you've got to keep the weather at bay. No glass windows here, just that one smoke hole, which does a terrible job of clearing the haze from the central hearth. The hearth is the heart of your home, a shallow pit in the middle of the room where a fire smolders day and night. Right now, it's down to glowing embers, but even so, the air is heavy with the smell of burnt wood and ash. You cough softly, wishing for a modern air purifier. But all you've got is a lungful of smoke that's probably shaving years off your life. The fire provides heat, light, and a place to cook. But it also makes your eyes water, and your clothes smell like a campfire gone wrong. If you're lucky, you might have a clay chimney pot to help vent the smoke, but most huts don't. So you're stuck with the haze. You glance down at the floor, which is nothing more than packed dirt, uneven and cold under your bare feet. Bits of straw and rushes are scattered across it, a feeble attempt to keep things clean. But let's be honest, it's a losing battle. Dirt floors soak up spills, collect dust, and harbor all sorts of critters you'd rather not think about. You spot a mouse scurrying along the wall, probably heading for the small pile of grain stored in a corner in medieval times. Mice were just part of the deal. Like noisy neighbors you can't evict. At least they're not as bad as the rats, which might carry something worse than a bad attitude. Your bed, if you can call it that, is still where you left it, a straw-filled sack on the floor, covered with a coarse wool blanket that feels more like sandpaper than comfort. It's lumpy, damp from the humidity, and crawling with fleas or lice that make you itch just thinking about them. You're tempted to fluff it up, but that might just release a cloud of dust and bugs, so you leave it alone. Modern mattresses are a distant dream here. And if you're missing your orthopedic pillow, well, tough luck. Some peasants used wooden headrests, which sounds about as comfy as sleeping on a brick. Sharing this space with you is your family, maybe a spouse, a couple of kids, or your parents, all crammed into this one room. Privacy is a fantasy you can't afford. Everyone sleeps, eats, and lives together, their snores and murmurs filling the air as they start to wake. And then there are the animals. A couple of chickens cluck softly in a corner, their feathers adding to the mess on the floor. A goat, tethered near the wall, chews on some straw, its eyes glinting in the dim light. These animals aren't pets, they're your livelihood, kept inside to protect them from thieves or predators. Their smell, a mix of manure and wet fur, mingles with the smoke, creating a scent that's about as inviting as a gym locker room after a long day. You move toward a small wooden table, the only furniture besides a stool or two. On it sits a clay jug of water, a wooden bowl, and maybe a loaf of hard, gritty bread left from yesterday. There's no kitchen counter, no fridge, no sink, because running water is about 500 years away from being invented. If you need water, you'll have to fetch it from the village well later, carrying it back in heavy wooden buckets. For now, you splash a bit of cold water on your face from the jug, feeling the chill against your skin. It's not exactly a refreshing morning routine, but it's better than nothing. Speaking of hygiene, let's talk about keeping things clean, or rather, the lack thereof. Sanitation in medieval times was practically non-existent. You don't have soap as you know it. Maybe you've got some lye-based stuff, but it's harsh and rare. Here's a quirky little fact. Some medieval households used urine as a cleaning agent because its ammonia content could break down grease and stains. That's right, you might be scrubbing your only pot with something you'd rather not think about. It's effective, in a gross sort of way, but it's not winning any awards for freshness. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, wishing for a bottle of dish soap or, frankly, anything that smells better than that. The lack of sanitation extends to waste disposal. There's no bathroom, no toilet paper, no plumbing instead. You've got a chamber pot tucked in a corner, a simple clay or wooden container that everyone in the family uses. When it's full, you'll carry it outside and dump it in a pit or, worse, toss it into the street, hoping it doesn't hit anyone passing by. In some places, people just open their shutters and let the waste fly, giving new meaning to the phrase, "watch your step." If you're thinking that sounds like a health hazard, you're not wrong. Disease spreads easily in these conditions. But we'll get to that later. As you look around, you realize how little you own. A few clay pots, a wooden spoon, a knife with a worn handle that's your inventory. No closets, no storage units, just a small chest or sack for your meager belongings. Your clothes. A rough tunic and hose made of wool or linen. Hang on a peg by the door. They're itchy, patched, and haven't been washed in weeks. Laundry is a luxury, done maybe once a month, and don't expect a washing machine. It's back-breaking work by the river, assuming you can spare the time. The hut is starting to feel smaller by the minute, and you haven't even faced the day's work yet. You take a deep breath, only to regret it as the smoke catches in your throat. This is your home, and it's a far cry from the modern comforts you're used to. No central heating, no soft carpets, no Netflix to unwind with. Instead, you've got a smoky, crowded space that's more about survival than comfort. As the village outside begins to hum with activity, you know it's time to get moving. Your morning routine awaits. And it's not going to be as simple as grabbing a coffee and checking your phone. You stir on your straw mattress, the coarse wool blanket scratching against your skin as you try to shake off the fog of sleep. Remember that lumpy bed from your hut. It's not doing you any favors this morning. The chill of dawn seeps through the cracks in the wattle and daub walls. making you shiver as you sit up in the dim light. The fire in the hearth has burned low, leaving the air cold and heavy with the lingering smell of smoke and livestock. Your first thought might be to hit the snooze button, but roosters don't come with that feature, and their crowing outside is your signal to get moving. Welcome to your medieval morning, where comfort is as rare as a sunny day in a British winter. You swing your legs over the side of the mattress, your bare feet touching the cold. Uneven dirt floor. It's gritty under your toes. A mix of dust and stray bits of straw that never seem to stay in one place. The chickens in the corner cluck softly, already awake and pecking at the floor, while the goat tethered nearby gives you a bleary-eyed stare, probably judging your life choices. You'd kill for a hot shower right now. But running water is a pipe dream, literally, instead. You stumble toward the wooden table where a clay jug of water sits, its surface cool and slightly slimy from the damp air. You pour a small amount into a wooden bowl, just enough to splash on your face. The water is ice cold, shocking your senses awake, and it smells faintly of earth. Probably because it was hauled from the village well yesterday. Soap. That's a luxury most peasants can't afford. If you're lucky, you might have a rough bar made from lye and animal fat, but it's more likely to strip your skin than clean it. You rub your hands together, trying to warm them, and notice the grime under your nails from yesterday's work in the fields. A manicure is about as likely as Wi-Fi in this village, so you make do with a quick scrub. Hygiene in medieval times is a battle you're not winning. The lack of running water means every drop you use has to be carried from the well or a nearby stream. A task that's as fun as it sounds when you're lugging heavy wooden buckets across muddy paths. Most peasants washed sparingly face, hands, maybe feet if they were feeling fancy, bathing your whole body. That's a rare event, maybe once a month, and it involves heating water over the fire and sitting in a wooden tub that's more splinter than spa. You glance at your reflection in the water bowl, distorted and murky, and decide you're better off not knowing how rough you look. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the chamber pot in the corner. Indoor plumbing is centuries away, so your bathroom is a simple clay pot tucked behind a makeshift curtain. If you're lucky enough to have one, everyone in the family uses it, and the smell is about as pleasant as you'd expect when it's full. You'll carry it outside to a pit behind the hut, or in some less considerate villages, you might just toss the contents out the door, hoping it lands in the street and not on some poor soul passing by. It's not exactly a glamorous start to your day, and you're starting to miss your flush toilet more than you ever thought possible. Here's a quirky little tidbit to make you squirm when it comes to cleaning up after using the chamber pot. Toilet paper is nowhere to be found. Instead, you might use a handful of straw, a smooth stone, or, if you're near a forest, some moss or leaves. That's right, nature's own toilet paper. About as soft as a pine cone and twice as awkward to use. It's effective enough. But you're probably dreaming of that plush 2-ply you left behind in the modern world. This is one of those moments where medieval life feels like a practical joke. And you're the punchline. You pull on your clothes. The same rough wool tunic and hose you wore yesterday. And maybe the day before that. They're stiff with dirt and sweat. But laundry is a chore for another day. one that involves hours of scrubbing by the river. You lace up your leather shoes. If you have them, many peasants go barefoot. Especially in warmer months like this May morning, the shoes are worn thin, offering little protection from the muddy ground outside. But they're better than nothing. You're already dreading the day's work, knowing it'll be hours of labor under the sun. But first, you need to get the household moving. You nudge your family awake, their groans mixing with the soft clucking of the chickens. Your spouse or siblings stir, rubbing their eyes, while the kids, if you have any, are already bouncing around, oblivious to the discomfort. You assign a few morning tasks. Someone needs to feed the animals, someone else to fetch more water. The goat needs to be milked, and the chickens need to be checked for eggs. Assuming the foxes didn't get to them first, these animals are your lifeline, providing milk, eggs, and eventually meat, so you treat them with more care than you do yourself. Outside, the village is coming alive. You hear the creak of cartwheels and the low murmur of neighbors greeting each other. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming wildflowers. But it's undercut by the faint whiff of manure from the fields. You step out to check the small garden patch near your hut, where you grow herbs like parsley or vegetables like cabbages. It's not much, but it's a supplement to the bland diet you'll face later. You notice a few weeds creeping in and make a mental note to pull them, assuming you have the energy after a day in the Lord's fields. The medieval morning is a grind, and you're only just beginning. The lack of hygiene facilities makes every task feel like a chore, and the constant presence of dirt and animals reminds you how far you are from modern comforts. You take a deep breath, trying to ignore the smoke still lingering in your lungs, and steel yourself for what's next. Feeding yourself is the next hurdle, and trust me, it's not going to be a gourmet experience. Your stomach rumbles, but you're not sure if it's hunger or dread for the meal ahead. You settle onto a wobbly wooden stool at the small table in your hut, your stomach rumbling after the morning's chores. Remember that cold splash of water from the jug. It didn't exactly prepare you for a feast, and now you're facing your first meal of the day. The air in your smoky hut carries the faint scent of burnt wood and damp straw, but there's no aroma of fresh coffee or sizzling bacon to lift your spirits. Instead, you're staring at a loaf of dark, heavy bread and a bowl of thin, grayish pottage that looks about as appetizing as dishwater. Welcome to medieval cuisine, where fine dining means you're lucky if your food doesn't make you sick. You pick up the bread, its crust rough and speckled with bits of grit that crunch unpleasantly between your fingers. This isn't the fluffy sourdough you might be craving. It's a dense, coarse loaf made from rye or barley, ground at the Lord's mill. That mill, by the way, is a medieval fact of life. Peasants were required to use the Lord's mill and pay a fee, often a portion of their grain. For the privilege, the millstones sometimes wore down, leaving tiny bits of stone in the flour, which means your bread is literally wearing down your teeth with every bite. It's like chewing gravel, but with fewer Michelin stars. You break off a piece, and it's hard, almost stale, even though it was baked yesterday. Bread is the backbone of your diet, making up most of your meals, and you eat it morning, noon, and night. It's not just food, it's survival, filling your belly when there's little else to go around, You try to soften it by dipping it into the pottage. A watery stew of oats, peas, or whatever vegetables you manage to grow in your small garden patch. Today's mix includes some wilted cabbage and a few stringy onions, boiled into a mush that's more about sustenance than flavor. If you're lucky, there might be a sprig of parsley from your garden, but don't expect a burst of culinary magic. You take a cautious sip, and the pottage is lukewarm, its texture slimy and its taste bland, like someone forgot to season it for the last 500 years. You're tempted to reach for salt, but that's a luxury, often worth more than the food itself. Spices. Forget it, those are for the lords and ladies up at the manor house, not for peasants like you. Your modern palate, used to pizza or spicy takeout, is screaming for anything with flavor. But this is what you've got. You sigh, wishing for a drive-through. But the closest thing to fast food here is grabbing an apple from a tree. Assuming the Lord's men don't catch you. Speaking of fruit, it's rare in your diet. Apples or berries might show up in season, but they're not a daily treat. Vegetables like cabbage, onions, or leeks are more common, grown in your garden or scavenged from the fields. But even those can be risky without refrigeration or proper storage. Food spoils quickly. That bread you're chewing. It might have patches of mold if it's been sitting too long, and the pottage could harbor bacteria from the unwashed pot it was cooked in. Food safety isn't exactly a medieval strong suit, and you're starting to understand why your stomach feels like it's playing a game of chance with every bite. Here's a quirky little tidbit that might make you gag in tough times. Bakers or desperate peasants sometimes stretch their flour by mixing in sawdust, dirt, or even ground-up acorns. It bulks up the bread. Sure, but it's about as nutritious as eating a cardboard box and twice as likely to make you sick. You inspect your loaf, half expecting to find a twig, and decide to chew carefully. This wasn't common everywhere, but in lean years, people did what they had to do to survive. It's a reminder that hunger was a constant companion in medieval life. And you're not exactly dining at a 5-star restaurant. Meat is the holy grail of medieval meals. But for you, it's a rare treat. The Lord might feast on venison or pork, but peasants like you only see meat on special occasions. Maybe a festival or after a pig is slaughtered in the fall. That pig you saw wandering toward the forest in Section 1. It's being fattened up for winter, and you'll be lucky to get a few strips of bacon or a bit of sausage. Most days, you're stuck with bread and pottage, washed down with weak ale. Water isn't always safe to drink streams, and wells can be contaminated, so ale, brewed with boiled water, is your go-to. It's low in alcohol, more like a watery beer, but it's safer than risking whatever's lurking in the village well. You take a sip of the ale from a wooden cup, its bitter taste cutting through the blandness of the pottage. It's not exactly a craft brew, and you're pretty sure it's been sitting in that jug a bit too long. But it's all you've got. You're starting to miss your morning smoothie, or even a plain glass of filtered water. The ale helps wash down the gritty bread, but it also reminds you how limited your options are. No grocery stores, no delivery apps, just whatever you can grow. Barter or scrounge as you eat. You glance at your family, huddled around the table. The kids are tearing into their bread with more enthusiasm than you can muster. Probably because they don't know any better. Your spouse or sibling passes you a small chunk of hard cheese, a rare treat from the goat's milk you collected this morning. It's tangy, almost sharp, and you savor it, knowing it might be the highlight of your meal for the week. Sharing food like this is a small moment of connection, a reminder that you're all in this together, scraping by in a world that doesn't make it easy. The meal is over quickly, there's not much to linger over. You wipe your hands on your tunic, adding another stain to the collection, and stand up, feeling only slightly less hungry than before. The food is enough to keep you going, but it's not exactly fueling you for a marathon. You're already dreading the long day of work ahead, knowing you'll need every bit of energy to get through it. The fields are waiting, and the Lord expects His share of your labor. You step outside, the morning air cool against your face, and brace yourself for the back-breaking tasks that define your life. You step out of your hut, the morning air cool against your face, your stomach barely settled from that gritty bread and watery pottage from earlier. The village is buzzing now, with peasants like you heading to the fields, their wooden tools slung over shoulders or dragged behind them. The sun is just peeking over the horizon, casting long shadows across the muddy paths. And you know what that means. It's time to work. Not a quick shift at a desk job, mind you, but a full day of back-breaking labor from dawn to dusk, with no coffee breaks or ergonomic chairs in sight. If you're missing your modern 9-to-5 with its lunch breaks and weekends, well, medieval life is about to make you rethink what tough day really means. You trudge toward the fields, your worn leather shoes sinking into the soft earth. Each step a reminder that sneakers are centuries away. As a peasant, your life revolves around the land, and today, you're working the Lord's fields, a requirement of the feudal system that keeps you tied to this village. Most peasants were serfs, bound to the manor, and you owe the Lord several days a week working His land before you can tend your own small plot. This isn't optional, it's the price of survival, paid in sweat and sore muscles. The Lord gets His crops harvested, His fields plowed, and you get just enough to keep your family fed. Assuming the weather cooperates, you reach the open fields, divided into long strips that stretch across the landscape like a patchwork quilt. Each family has their own strip to farm. But today, you're on the Lord's land, a vast expanse that needs plowing before the next planting. You grab a wooden plow, its iron-tipped blade heavy and awkward, and hitch it to a pair of oxen borrowed from a neighbor. These beasts are your lifeline. Stronger than you, but stubborn as a Monday morning. You shout, "Gee," to steer them right. A quirky medieval trick that feels like yelling at a GPS that doesn't listen. Some peasants used specific commands like "Gee" or "Haw" to guide their oxen, a bit like training a very large, very slow dog. It's oddly charming. Until you realize one wrong move could mean a day's work wasted. You grip the plow, your hands already calloused from years of this, and push forward, the blade cutting into the soil. The earth is heavy, still damp from spring rains, and every step feels like wrestling a boulder. Your back aches, your arms burn, and the sun isn't even fully up yet. Plowing is just one of many tasks depending on the season. You might be sowing seeds, weeding, or harvesting crops like rye or barley. In May, you're likely preparing the fields for summer crops, a task that demands every ounce of your strength. You wipe sweat from your brow, wishing for a cold drink. But all you've got is a jug of weak ale tucked in the shade of a tree. The tools you're using are basic, often just wood with a bit of iron if you're lucky. No tractors, no power tools, just your muscles and whatever you can cobble together. If the plow breaks, you'll spend hours sharpening the blade or patching it with whatever's handy. Maybe a piece of wood you carved yourself. It's not exactly high-tech, and it's about as fun as assembling furniture with missing instructions. The physical toll is relentless back pain, blisters, and the occasional injury from a slipped tool are just part of the job. You're starting to see why medieval peasants didn't have gym memberships. Their whole life was a workout. Your wages, if you can call them that, are meager. Most peasants didn't see coin often. Instead, you're paid in kind, maybe a share of the harvest, a bit of grain, or the right to graze your animals on the Lord's land. Money exists, but it's rare in villages like yours, where bartering is the norm. You might trade a few eggs for a neighbor's help fixing your fence, or give the miller some grain to grind your flour. It's a system that keeps you alive, but barely. And there's no such thing as a savings account. If the harvest fails, you're not just broke, you're starving. As the sun climbs higher, the heat starts to build, and you're only halfway through the field. You pause to catch your breath, leaning on the plow, and watch other peasants working nearby. Some are weeding, bent over with small sickles, while others drive carts loaded with manure to fertilize the soil. The smell isn't exactly pleasant, but you're used to it by now, just like you're used to the ache in your shoulders. A group of women pass by, carrying baskets of seeds to sow, their chatter a faint hum over the lowing of the oxen. Community is everything here. You rely on each other to get through the day, whether it's sharing tools or lending a hand. But don't think this is all teamwork and rosy camaraderie. The Lord's overseer, a stern man with a whip at his belt, watches from the edge of the field, making sure you're not slacking. If you fall behind, you might lose your plot or face a fine you can't pay. The pressure is constant, and there's no HR department to complain to. You're tempted to mutter something about workers' rights, but that concept is about as foreign as indoor plumbing. Instead, you keep plowing, each furrow a small victory in a day that feels endless. The physical demands are only part of the struggle. The work is dangerous, sharp tools, heavy loads, and unpredictable animals mean injuries are common. A cut from a sickle can get infected, and there's no doctor's office to patch you up. You're also at the mercy of the weather. A sudden rain could turn the field to mud, undoing hours of work. While a drought could wipe out the crops you're banking on, every day is a gamble, and you're not exactly holding a winning hand. As noon approaches, your stomach growls again. That morning pottage long gone. You glance at the ale jug, but you know you need to save it for later. Lunch, if you get one, might be another hunk of bread or a handful of raw vegetables from your garden. You're starting to miss your office vending machine, even the overpriced snacks. The day stretches ahead. Hours more of labor before you can rest, and you're already dreaming of that lumpy straw mattress. Bugs and all, but the fields won't plow themselves, and the Lord's patience is thinner than your ale. You trudge back from the fields, your muscles aching from hours of wrestling that stubborn plow, the midday sun beating down on your shoulders. remember that heavy ox team from earlier. One wrong step with those beasts could have left you with a bruised foot or worse. And now, as you wipe the sweat from your brow, you notice a small cut on your hand from the plow's rough handle. It's nothing major, just a sting. But in this medieval world, even a scratch can be a problem. You're used to popping into a pharmacy for some antiseptic and a Band-Aid. But here, healthcare is more guesswork than science. Welcome to medieval medicine, where a trip to the healer feels like playing roulette with your life. You head toward the village, hoping to find someone who knows a thing or two about patching you up. Your hut, with its smoky air and dirt floor, isn't exactly a sterile environment, and that cut could easily get infected. The Middle Ages are a time before germ theory, so nobody knows about bacteria or viruses. Instead, people believe in humoral theory, the idea that your health depends on balancing 4 bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you're sick, it's because your humors are out of whack, and the fix might involve something as pleasant as draining your blood. Spoiler alert, it's about as effective as trying to fix a smartphone with a hammer. You find the village healer, an older woman with a weathered face, sitting outside her hut with a basket of herbs. She's the closest thing to a doctor you've got, but her tools are a far cry from a modern clinic. She might have some knowledge of plants' herbs like yarrow or comfrey for wounds, but her methods are hit or miss. She inspects your cut, muttering about bad humors, and hands you a poultice made of crushed herbs, wrapped in a damp cloth. It smells like a mix of grass and regret, and you press it against the wound, hoping it does more good than harm. The poultice stings, and you're not sure if it's healing you or just making your hand smell like a forest floor. Here's a quirky little tidbit that might make you wince. Some medieval healers used spider webs as a bandage, believing they could stop bleeding and promote healing. That's right. You might be wrapping your cut in a cobweb, hoping the spider wasn't home when you collected it. It's not entirely crazy. Spider silk has natural antiseptic properties, but you're probably wishing for a box of sterile gauze right about now. You thank the healer, trying not to think about the 8-legged first aid kit, and promise to bring her some eggs later as payment. Bartering is the norm here, and doctors don't come cheap, even if their cures are questionable. If your cut gets worse, you might face bloodletting, a common treatment where the healer slices a vein or uses leeches to balance your humors. It's as fun as it sounds, leaving you weak and dizzy, with no guarantee it'll help. For anything more serious like a fever or a broken bone, your options are even grimmer. Bones might be set with wooden splints, but without the proper sanitation. Infections are common. Surgery, if it happens, is done without anesthesia, and you're lucky if the barber surgeon washes his hands first. You're starting to see why medieval life expectancy hovered around 30 to 40 years, though many died younger from disease or injury. Speaking of disease, it's the real killer in this world, the Black Death, which swept through Europe in the 14th century, killed up to a third of the population in some areas, and even in non-plague years. Diseases like dysentery, smallpox, or tuberculosis are constant threats. Living in that cramped hut with livestock, as we saw back in Section 2, doesn't help germs spread easily in unsanitary conditions. that chamber pot you emptied this morning. It's probably contributing to the village's water contamination, making every sip of ale or bite of pottage a potential health risk. You're starting to miss your filtered water and annual checkups more than ever. You head back to your hut, the poultice still pressed against your hand, and try to shake off the worry. But illness is everywhere. A neighbor's child has a fever, and you overhear whispers about bad air causing it. A common medieval belief. You might sprinkle some herbs around your hut to ward off evil spirits, just in case superstition is as much a part of healing as herbs. If the fever spreads, the whole village could be in trouble, and there's no hospital to run to. You're on your own, praying to St. Roch, the patron saint of plague victims, for protection. The physical toll of your morning's labor isn't helping your health either. Those aching muscles from plowing could turn into something worse if you overdo it. And there's no concept of taking a sick day. You work through pain, fever, or fatigue, because stopping means no food for your family. Women, especially, face extra risks. Childbirth is dangerous, with high mortality rates for both mothers and infants due to infections or complications. If you are a woman in this village, you might be dreading pregnancy, knowing the odds aren't in your favor, as you sit by the hearth, rekindling the fire to warm your hands. You feel the weight of this world's fragility. A cut, a cough, a bad harvest, any of these could tip the scales from survival to disaster. You're tempted to joke that medieval health care makes your last trip to the dentist look like a spa day. But the reality is sobering. You wrap your hand tighter in the cloth, hoping the healer's poultice works, and try to focus on the tasks ahead. The fields still need tending, and the Lord doesn't care if you're feeling under the weather. Survival means pushing through. But you're starting to see why staying healthy in this world is a miracle in itself. You're back in the village, your hand still stinging from that cut you patched up with the healer's poultice, the memory of her spiderweb remedy making you shudder. The sun is high now, and the fields are alive with the hum of work. But a commotion near the village square pulls you away from your tasks. A crowd is gathering, their voices low and tense, and you catch snippets of gossip about a stolen loaf of bread. Remember that gritty bread from your morning meal. Someone's in trouble for taking one. And in this medieval world, justice is about as forgiving as a winter storm. You edge closer, your heart sinking. Because trouble here means more than a slap on the wrist. It could mean losing a hand, or worse. You join the crowd, the air thick with the smell of sweat and dust. As you watch two men arguing in front of the Lord's overseer, a grim figure with a staff and a scowl that could curdle milk. One man, a neighbor you recognize, is accused of stealing bread from another's hut. He's shouting his innocence, but the overseer isn't listening. In medieval times, justice is dispensed by the local lord or his men, and it's less about evidence and more about power. The manor court, where disputes are settled, is held in the Lord's hall or sometimes right here in the open, and it's as much a spectacle as a trial. You're used to courtrooms with lawyers and juries. But here, fairness is a fairy tale nobody believes in. The overseer calls for a trial, and you feel a chill that has nothing to do with the breeze. Medieval justice often relied on trial by ordeal, a brutal practice rooted in the belief that God would reveal the truth. The accused might be forced to hold a red-hot iron or plunge their hand into boiling water if the wound heals cleanly. They're innocent. If it festers, they're guilty. It's about as scientific as flipping a coin. And you're glad it's not you standing there. The crowd murmurs, some whispering prayers, others betting on the outcome like it's a medieval reality show. You're tempted to joke that at least there's no paperwork. But the stakes are too high for humor, in some cases. The Lord might demand trial by combat, where the accused and accuser fight to prove their case, with the winner deemed right by divine judgment. For a simple theft, though, the punishment is more straightforward and no less harsh. The overseer declares that if the man is found guilty, he'll face the stocks or maybe lose a hand. Public punishments like flogging, branding, or mutilation were common for crimes as small as stealing food, especially in times of scarcity. In England, for instance, the assize of bread and ale in 1266 set harsh penalties for bakers or brewers who cheated customers. But stealing food could cost you dearly. 2. You glance at your own hands, suddenly grateful for every loaf you've got left. Here's a quirky tidbit that sounds almost comical. Some trials used something called ordeal by cake, where the accused had to swallow a piece of dry bread or cheese without choking. If you choked, it was a sign of guilt, as if God himself was blocking your throat. Imagine trying to stay calm while everyone watches you chew, knowing one bad swallow could land you in the stocks. It's like a medieval version of a lie detector test, except it's less accurate and comes with a side of crumbs. You're starting to miss your modern legal system, where a lawyer might at least try to get you off on a technicality. You watch as the accused man pleads his case, his voice cracking with fear. He claims he was starving, his children crying for food. But the overseer's face is stone. The crowd is split, some sympathize, knowing hunger all too well, while others demand punishment to protect their own meager supplies. You feel a pang of unease, realizing that in this world, you're one accusation away from the same fate. There's no presumption of innocence, no right to a fair trial. If the Lord or his men decide you're guilty, that's it. Your fate is sealed. And appeals are about as useful as shouting into the wind. Punishments are designed to deter and humiliate. The stocks, wooden frames that lock your hands and feet, leave you exposed to the village's jeers, not to mention rotting food or worse thrown your way. For serious crimes like theft or poaching, you might face branding with a hot iron or mutilation, losing a hand, an ear, or even your nose. Public executions, like hanging or beheading, are reserved for crimes like treason or murder. But they're not uncommon, and the village square often doubles as a gallows. You swallow hard. The thought of that stolen bread making your stomach churn. And not just because of the sawdust you worried about earlier. The overseer decides to settle the matter with a fine, a rare mercy. But the man has no coins to pay. Instead, he'll work extra days on the Lord's land, adding to the backbreaking labor you already know too well. You breathe a sigh of relief for him. But it's a reminder of how precarious life is here. One wrong move, one angry neighbor, and you could be facing the same judgment. The Lord's power is absolute, and his overseers enforce it with an iron fist, leaving you with no rights to speak of. You're starting to see why safety in this world is as rare as a hot bath. As the crowd disperses, You head back toward the fields, your heart heavier than your plow. The village feels smaller now, the faces around you more guarded. You pass the stocks, empty for now, and shiver at the thought of sitting there, the target of every passerby's scorn. Justice here isn't about fairness, it's about control, and you're just a peasant trying to stay on the right side of it. The day's not over yet, and there's more to navigate, like the rigid social hierarchy that keeps you in your place. No matter how hard you work, you walk away from the village square, the tension of that bread theft dispute still lingering like the dust in the air. Remember the overseer's cold stare from that makeshift trial. It's a reminder that you're not just fighting to survive the fields or fend off disease, you're also trapped in a system that keeps you firmly in your place. The sun is dipping lower now, casting golden light over the fields. But there's no warmth in the reality of your life as a peasant. Welcome to the feudal hierarchy, where your birth decides your fate. And dreaming of a corner office or a promotion is about as realistic as wishing for a spaceship in this muddy village. You glance toward the manor house in the distance, its wooden walls and steep roof a stark contrast to your wattle and daub hut. That's where the Lord lives, the man who holds your life in his hands. The feudal system, the backbone of medieval society, is a pyramid with the king at the top, doling out land to nobles in exchange for loyalty and knights for protection. Below them are the peasants, people like you, making up about 90% of the population, scraping by at the bottom. Most of you are serfs, bound to the land, unable to leave without the Lord's permission. You work his fields, pay him taxes in grain or livestock, and hope he doesn't notice you enough to make your life harder. As you pass the fields, you see the Lord's men riding by, their horses kicking up clods of earth. They're knights, sworn to protect the manor, but they barely glance at you. To them, you're just another pair of hands to till the soil, no more important than the oxen you were yelling gee at earlier. The hierarchy is clear. The Lord and his knights live in relative comfort, eating meat and wearing fine wool, while you're lucky to have a patched tunic and a bowl of pottage. You're tempted to roll your eyes at the unfairness, but complaining won't change a thing. It might just land you in the stocks. As you saw in that grim scene at the square, your status as a serf means you're tied to this manor for life. Unlike free men, who have a bit more freedom and might own a small plot outright. You can't pack up and move to the next village for a better job. The Lord owns the land, and you're part of the package, like the goats or the grain. If you want to leave, you'd need his blessing. And good luck getting that he'd rather lose a tooth than a worker. You're starting to miss your modern world, where you could at least quit a bad job or move to a new city. Here, your world is this village, and the Lord's word is law. Here's a quirky little tidbit that might make you groan if you want to get married. You might have to pay a merchet fee to the Lord for his permission. That's right, even your love life comes with a tax, like a medieval version of a dating app subscription, but without the swiping, this fee. Common in parts of England. Could be a few pennies or a chicken, but for a peasant scraping by. It's a big ask. You imagine trying to explain to your crush that you can't tie the knot until you've bribed the Lord with your best hen. It's absurd, but it's just one more way the feudal system keeps you under control. You keep walking. passing a group of women spinning wool outside their huts, their hands moving deftly with wooden spindles. They're chatting quietly, but their eyes dart toward the manor house now and then, wary of the overseer's patrols. Everyone knows their place here, men, women, children, all working within the roles the system assigns. Women might tend gardens or make cloth, while men plow or build. But everyone answers to the Lord. Even the village priest, who you'll see at church on Sunday, is part of this hierarchy, serving both God and the manor's interests. The lack of social mobility is suffocating in your modern life. You might dream of climbing the career ladder or starting a side hustle. But here, those concepts don't exist. If you're born a peasant, you'll die a peasant, and your children will likely follow the same path. The Lord's children might become knights or marry into wealth. But for you, the ceiling is low and made of thatch. You might hear tales of a rare peasant who becomes a cleric or a merchant. But those are exceptions. Like winning the medieval lottery, you're stuck. And the weight of that reality settles over you like the dust on your tunic. As you near your own strip of land, you pause to check the barley you planted earlier this spring. It's growing, but slowly. And you know the Lord will take a chunk of the harvest as tax. You also owe him a tithe, 10% of your crops or livestock to the church. Another layer of the hierarchy that keeps you tethered. You're tempted to joke that the only thing you own outright is your collection of blisters. But even those feel like they belong to the manor. The system is designed to keep you working, not thriving, and every day reinforces that truth. The village is quiet now, the afternoon heat slowing everyone down. You see a few children playing with a leather ball, their laughter a brief break from the grind. But even they know they'll soon join the ranks of laborers. The hierarchy shapes everything: your work, your home, your future. You're part of a community. Sure, but it's one built on survival, not equality. As you head back to your tasks, you feel the weight of your place in this world. Knowing there's no climbing out of it, the day's not done, and there's more to face, like the superstitions that guide your every decision, whether you like it or not. You pause by your barley strip, the late afternoon sun warming your back as you check the tender green shoots, hoping they'll survive the season. Remember that feudal hierarchy keeping you tethered to this land. It's not just the Lord who's watching. God's got his eye on you, too. Or so the village priest would have you believe. The church bell tolls in the distance, a low, mournful sound that pulls you toward the stone chapel at the edge of the village. It's not Sunday, but a saint's day calls for a quick prayer, and skipping it might bring bad luck or worse. The priest's disapproval. Welcome to medieval life, where faith and superstition wrap around every moment like the smoke in your hut. Impossible to escape. You trudge toward the church, your patched tunic sticking to your skin after a day in the fields. The Catholic Church is the heartbeat of this world. Its teachings shaping everything from your work to your thoughts. As a peasant, you're expected to attend Mass regularly, especially on Sundays and holy days. Crowding into the small chapel with its damp walls and flickering candles, the priest, a stern man in rough robes, speaks in Latin, a language you don't understand, but the rituals kneeling. Crossing yourself feel like a lifeline to something bigger. The church promises salvation, but it also demands your obedience and a tithe. That 10% of your crops or livestock you owe, as we mentioned back when you were grumbling about the Lord's taxes. You slip into the chapel, the air cool and heavy with the scent of wax and old stone. The congregation is small today, just a handful of villagers whispering prayers or glancing nervously at the wooden crucifix above the altar. You kneel on the hard floor, your knees aching from the day's labor, and try to focus on the priest's droning voice. Religion isn't just about faith here. It's a social glue, binding the village together under the church's watchful eye. Missing Mass could mark you as a troublemaker, and in a world where the Lord's overseer is quick to punish, as you saw in that bread theft trial. You don't need more enemies, but faith isn't the only force guiding your actions. Superstition runs deep, a tangled web of folk beliefs that fill the gaps where the church's teachings leave off. You sprinkle dried herbs around your hut's doorway, hoping to keep evil spirits at bay, a habit you picked up from your mother. A black cat crossing your path this morning made you pause, wondering if it's an omen of bad luck. You're not alone. Everyone in the village has their rituals, from touching a sacred relic to whispering charms over a sick child. These beliefs aren't just quirks. They're a way to make sense of a world where disease, as you learned with that poultice, or a failed harvest can strike without warning. Here's a quirky tidbit that might make you chuckle. Some peasants believed carrying a toad's foot in a small pouch could ward off evil spirits or protect against illness. It's like a medieval lucky charm, except it's a lot less charming when you think about where that foot came from. You check your own pockets, half expecting to find a shriveled amphibian part, and decide you'll stick to herbs for now. It's a strange custom, but when you're surrounded by threats you can't control, you'll try anything to tip the scales in your favor. You leave the chapel, the priest's words about sin and redemption echoing in your mind. Outside, the village feels alive with unseen forces. A sudden gust of wind rattles the thatched roofs, and you wonder if it's a sign maybe St. Cuthbert is angry, or maybe it's just the weather. Superstitions like these aren't just for the gullible, they're a survival tool. If a crow lands on your hut, you might avoid the planting crops that day, fearing a curse. If your neighbor's cow stops giving milk, someone's bound to whisper about witchcraft. And you've seen how quickly accusations can spiral, like that stolen bread incident. The church doesn't always approve of these folk beliefs, but it's hard to stamp them out. The priest might preach against charms, but he's not above selling pardons, slips of paper promising forgiveness for your sins. If you can spare the coin, you don't have any to give. So you rely on prayers and the occasional ritual to keep the devil at bay. The line between faith and superstition blurs, and you're caught in the middle, trying to please God while dodging whatever spirits might be lurking in the woods beyond the village. As you head back to your hut, you pass a small shrine by the well, a wooden cross adorned with wilted flowers. You pause to touch it, murmuring a prayer for a good harvest. It's a habit, like checking your phone in the modern world. But here, it feels like a matter of life and death. The church's influence is everywhere, from the tithe that cuts into your meager resources to the fear of eternal punishment that keeps you in line. You're tempted to joke that the only thing scarier than the devil is the priest's sermon voice. But you keep it to yourself. Blasphemy's a quick way to trouble. The weight of faith and superstition makes every decision feel heavier. Should you work tomorrow? Or is that crow a warning? Should you trust the healer's herbs? Or seek a charm from the old woman who lives by the forest? You're starting to miss your modern world, where a weather app or a doctor's visit could clear up your doubts. Here, you're guided by a mix of fear and hope, with the church and the spirits watching your every move. As the day winds down, you know there's more to face, like the ignorance that keeps you from understanding the world beyond your village. You trudge back to your hut as the evening light fades, the toll of the church bell from that Saint's Day prayer still echoing in your ears. Remember those herbs you sprinkled to ward off spirits. They're a sign of how much you rely on superstition to make sense of the world, because knowledge real. Tangible knowledge is as out of reach as the Lord's manor house. You sit by the hearth, stirring the embers to coax a bit more warmth, and glance at your family, their faces lit by the flickering fire. There's no book to pick up, no screen to scroll through, no way to learn beyond the stories you share. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where education is a luxury, and ignorance is your constant companion, like an uninvited guest who never leaves. You lean back, the straw mattress creaking under you, and think about your day plowing, praying, dodging the overseer's wrath. It's a cycle you understand, but anything beyond your village, that's a mystery. In medieval Europe, literacy was rare, with only about 5 to 10% of people able to read, mostly monks, priests, and the wealthy. The Catholic Church, as you saw in that chapel, controlled most learning, with monasteries and cathedrals housing handwritten manuscripts in Latin, a language as foreign to you as rocket science. You're a peasant, and your world is oral stories, songs, and sermons, passed down like the worn tools you use in the fields. You try to recall a tale your father told, something about a dragon in the hills, but the details are fuzzy. There's no library to check, no Google to clarify. Education for peasants like you is practical. Learned through sweat how to plant barley, mend a fence, or milk a goat. Boys might pick up a trade, like blacksmithing, by watching their fathers, while girls learn to spin wool or cook pottage from their mothers. Schools exist, but they're for the elite noble children or those training for the clergy, studying in far-off towns you'll never see. You're tempted to joke that your only diploma is a callus, but it's true, your hands know more than your mind ever will. The church is your main source of learning, but it's less about knowledge and more about obedience. The priest's sermons, like the one you heard today, talk of sin and salvation, not geography or math. You know the Lord's Prayer by heart, but you couldn't read it if it was written on your hut's wall. Books are rare, expensive treasures, made of parchment and copied by hand, locked away in monasteries or the Lord's library. Even if you saw one, you wouldn't know where to start. You're starting to miss your modern world, where a quick search could answer any question, from why the sky is blue to how to fix a leaky faucet. Here's a quirky tidbit that might make you smile. Some peasants believed touching a book, even if they couldn't read it, could bring good luck or divine favor. It's like rubbing a lamp for a wish, except the lamp is a dusty tome of Latin hymns, and the genie is nowhere to be found. You imagine brushing your fingers across a book's leather cover, hoping for a bit of magic to make your crops grow, and chuckle at the thought. Books are so revered, so mysterious, that they're almost sacred, but their contents are as inaccessible to you as the stars. You turn to your family, asking your eldest child to repeat a story about the saints, hoping to keep the tradition alive. The kid stumbles through it, mixing up names, and you laugh softly, correcting them with what you remember. Storytelling is how you learn history, morals, even practical tips. But it's unreliable, shaped by whoever's talking. A neighbor might swear the forest is haunted because his grandfather said so, and you believe it, because what else do you have? Superstition, as you've seen, fills the gaps: crows, cats, or a toad's foot, like that odd charm you heard about. All carry meaning when knowledge is scarce. This ignorance isn't just a lack of facts, it's a barrier. You can't read the Lord's decrees, so you rely on the overseer's word, hoping he's honest. You can't study the stars to predict the weather, so you watch for omens, like that gust of wind you worried about at the chapel. Even medicine, as you learned with that spiderweb poultice, is more guesswork than science, because nobody in the village knows why wounds fester or fevers burn. You're trapped in a cycle of not knowing, and questioning too much could brand you a heretic, a lesson you picked up from the priest's stern warnings. As the fire crackles, you feel the weight of this world's limits. You're smart, resourceful, you've survived floods, hunger, and the Lord's taxes, but you're cut off from the tools to understand why things happen. The church says it's God's will, and the Lord says it's your duty, and you're left piecing together the rest with half-remembered tales and a sprinkle of herbs. You're tempted to joke that your brain's like your hut's dirt floor full of potential, but nobody's sweeping it clean. Instead, you pull your blanket tighter, listening to the soft snores of your family, and wonder what lies beyond the village. A question you'll never answer. The night is closing in, but your day's not over. There's still time for a rare moment of joy, something to break the monotony of labor and ignorance. The village might have a game or a song tonight, a fleeting chance to forget your place in this unforgiving world. You close your eyes, the fire's warmth lulling you, and brace for whatever comes next, knowing knowledge won't be your ally. You settle by the hearth, the fire's soft crackle blending with the murmurs of your family, their faces glowing in the dim light. Remember those stories you shared earlier, piecing together tales of saints and dragons. That's about as close as you get to Netflix in this medieval village. And tonight, the promise of something more, a bit of fun, lifts your spirits. The day's labor is done, the barley checked, the Lord's fields plowed. And now, as the stars peek through the smoke hole in your thatched roof, you hear laughter drifting from the village square. Welcome to medieval entertainment, where a game or a song is a rare treat, like finding an extra scrap of cheese in your pottage. You pull on your worn cloak and step outside, the cool evening air sharp against your skin. The village is alive with a small gathering, a handful of neighbors clustering around a flickering bonfire. It's not a festival, those are reserved for holy days or harvests, but a spontaneous moment of respite, maybe sparked by a good day's work or a traveling minstrel passing through. You're used to scrolling through apps or binge-watching shows to unwind. But here, entertainment is raw, communal, and as fleeting as the fire's warmth. You join the circle, your tired muscles easing as you soak in the rare chance to just be. A group of children are playing nearby, kicking a leather ball stuffed with straw, their shouts echoing in the dusk. It's a simple game, but it's the closest thing to fun they get outside of chores. Adults, too, have their games, and you spot a few men setting up a crude version of Skittles. Using wooden pins and a heavy ball, you give it a try, rolling the ball and laughing when it veers into the dirt, earning a good-natured jeer from your neighbor. Games like these, archery, wrestling, or tossing stones at a target are common, especially for men. Though women might join in with dancing or singing, it's not exactly a sports league, but it's a way to blow off steam. Assuming the Lord's overseer isn't around to scold you for slacking. Here's a quirky tidbit that might make you wince. Some villages played a wild game called mob football. A chaotic free-for-all that's more brawl than sport. Picture dozens of people chasing a pig's bladder across fields, with no rules, no referee, and a lot of bruised shins. It's like soccer's rowdy ancestor, and while it's fun in theory, you're glad your village isn't hosting one tonight. Your plow-induced aches are bad enough. You imagine trying to explain mob football to your modern friends, who'd probably call it a lawsuit waiting to happen, and grin at the thought. You turn your attention to a minstrel strumming a lute, its twanging notes cutting through the chatter. He's a rare visitor, his patched cloak and weathered face hinting at a life on the road. His songs are simple tales of knights, lost loves, or cheeky jabs at greedy lords, carefully worded to avoid trouble. You clap along, your voice joining the others. Rough from a day of shouting at oxen, but eager for the melody. Music is a treasure here, played on basic instruments like lutes, pipes, or drums. Often during festivals or these impromptu gatherings. It's not a concert with pyrotechnics, but it's enough to make your heart feel lighter, if only for a moment. The fire crackles, and an older woman starts a story, her voice low and rhythmic, drawing everyone in. She tells of a local hero who outwitted a forest spirit. A tale you've heard before, but never tire of. Storytelling is the heart of peasant entertainment, especially on long winter nights when work slows. These stories, like the ones you shared with your child, carry lessons, humor, and a bit of magic, filling the gap left by books you can't read. You lean closer, the fire's glow dancing in your eyes, and for a moment, the weight of the feudal system, the Lord's taxes, and that toad's foot charm fade away. But don't get too comfortable. Leisure is a rarity. Most of your time is swallowed by labor, as you know from those endless hours in the fields. And the church frowns on too much frivolity. The priest, with his Latin sermons, might call these gatherings sinful if they get too rowdy. And the Lord expects you back at work at dawn. Festivals, like the upcoming midsummer feast, offer more elaborate fun dances. Feasts. Maybe a play by traveling performers, but they're tied to the church or the harvest. Not your personal schedule. You're starting to miss your modern weekends, where downtime is a right, not a stolen moment. As the minstrel finishes his song, you toss him a small loaf from your pocket, a barter for his performance. The crowd thins, villagers drifting back to their huts, their laughter fading into the night. You linger by the fire, reluctant to return to your smoky, cramped home, where the straw mattress and its bugs await. These moments of joy are like stars in a cloudy sky, bright but brief. And you savor them, knowing tomorrow brings more plow, more sweat, more survival. You're tempted to joke that medieval fun is like your pottage thin, but you take what you can get. The night deepens, and you head back. The village quiet now except for the distant hoot of an owl. Entertainment has lifted your spirits, but it's a small bandage on a life of hardship. There's still more to face, like the dangers lurking beyond the village, from bandits to wild animals, ready to test your survival in new ways. You linger in the quiet of your hut, the echoes of last night's laughter and that minstrel's lute still warming your thoughts. Remember that brief escape by the bonfire, kicking a ball with the kids. It feels like a distant dream now as you step outside into the pre-dawn chill. The village hushed except for the soft clink of a neighbor's tools. You're heading to check your livestock, a task that means venturing past the village's edge, where the fields meet the dark line of the forest. In your modern life, a walk might mean dodging traffic, but here, it's a gamble with bandits, beasts, and the whims of nature. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where danger waits just beyond the safety of your thatched roof. You sling a worn sack over your shoulder, carrying a wooden staff more for reassurance than defense, and start down the muddy path. The air is damp, heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine, and the forest looms ahead, its shadows thick even as the sky lightens. Bandits are a real threat in these parts, outlaws who've fled justice or fallen on hard times. Hiding in the woods to ambush travelers or raid villages. You've heard stories of entire flocks stolen or lone peasants beaten for a sack of grain, like the one you're carrying now. The Lord's knights patrol the main roads, but out here, you're on your own, and your staff feels about as useful as a twig against a sword. You grip the staff tighter, scanning the trees for movement. Rural areas like yours, far from the king's courts, are prime targets for banditry, especially in times of famine when desperation turns neighbors into thieves. The justice system, as you saw in that bread theft trial, is harsh but slow, and outlaws know they can slip through the cracks. You're tempted to joke that the only thing scarier than a bandit is the Lord's tax collector. But the rustle of leaves makes your heart skip, and humor feels far away. You hurry past the forest's edge, praying you don't become the next village gossip. Then there's the wildlife. You reach the small pen where your goats and chickens huddle, checking for signs of trouble. Wolves are the biggest worry packs roam the forests, drawn by the scent of livestock or the promise of an easy meal. A single wolf can take down a goat, and a pack could wipe out your herd, leaving you with nothing but debt to the Lord. Wild boars, with their sharp tusks, are just as bad, trampling crops or charging if you cross their path. You spot a broken fence post, claw marks etched into the wood, and your stomach twists. That's no bandit's work. It's a reminder that nature's as unforgiving as any outlaw. Here's a quirky tidbit that might raise an eyebrow. Some peasants hung wolf tails on their doors, believing they'd scare off predators or signal to wolves that this village wasn't worth the trouble. It's like a medieval beware of dog sign, except you're banking on a bit of fur to do the trick. You check your own door, half expecting to see a scruffy tail dangling there, and wonder if it's worth trying. Superstition, as you learned with that toad's foot charm. is a lifeline when swords and walls aren't enough, but you'd rather have a proper gate than a talisman any day. You mend the fence with a spare bit of wood, your hands clumsy in the cold, and glance at the sky. Clouds are gathering, heavy and gray, and you know what that means. Storms are another enemy. A flood could drown your barley, like the chutes you checked yesterday, or turn your dirt-floored hut into a muddy mess. Fire, sparked by lightning or a careless hearth, could burn the village to ash. Thatch roofs going up like kindling. There's no weather app to warn you, no insurance to rebuild. You rely on omens, like that crow you worried about at the chapel, and prayers to Saint Christopher for protection. But nature doesn't negotiate. You herd the goats back toward the village. They're bleating a small comfort against the growing wind. The forest feels closer now, its shadows stretching across the fields like fingers. You've heard tales of other dangerous bears in the deeper woods, or bandits bold enough to raid in daylight. Even the Lord's men, meant to protect you, can be a threat, demanding extra grain or bullying those who can't pay. Safety is a myth here. As fragile as the straw in your mattress, you're starting to miss your modern world, where a locked door and a phone call could keep trouble at bay. As you near the village, you spot a neighbor repairing a cart, his face etched with worry. He mutters about a peddler who never made it to market, likely ambushed on the road. The news settles over you like the storm clouds above, a reminder that every trip beyond the village is a roll of the dice. You're tempted to joke that the only thing you're hunting is a good night's sleep, but the weight of survival keeps you quiet. You secure the goats in their pen, double-checking the knots, and head back to your hut, the day's dangers still buzzing in your mind. The morning is young, but you're already worn out, and there's more to face, like the endless cycle of labor and obligation that never lets up, even when the world feels like it's closing in. You step inside, the familiar smoky air a small comfort, and brace for what's next, knowing safety is as fleeting as last night's song. You slip back into your hut, the familiar haze of smoke stinging your eyes as you brush off the morning's chill from checking your livestock. That wolf-scratched fence from earlier has you on edge. But now, as you catch your reflection in a pail of cloudy water, you're hit with a new kind of discomfort. Your tunic, caked with mud and sweat, clings to your skin, and your hair's a tangled mess that hasn't seen a proper wash in weeks. In your modern life, you'd grab a fresh shirt or hit the shower. But here, looking presentable is as likely as the Lord inviting you to dinner. Welcome to medieval peasant fashion, where your clothes are as rough as your plow and hygiene is a battle you're losing. You tug at your tunic, a heavy slab of wool that's been your second skin for longer than you'd like to admit. It's patched where it tore on a bramble or caught on a cart, the stitches jagged from your clumsy work with a bone needle. Peasants like you wear simple garments, men in knee-length tunics and hose, women in ankle-long dresses with aprons all spun from wool or linen by village hands. Fancy fabrics like silk or velvet are for nobles, not for someone who smells like goats and barley dust. Your tunic's color, once a dull green, is now a blotchy map of stains, and it itches like a swarm of ants. You're tempted to joke that it's got more patches than your lord's promises, but the scratchy wool kills the humor. You slump onto a wobbly stool, eyeing a fresh rip in your hose, the leggings that hug your legs like a grudging friend. Mending is your evening ritual, but it's a slog thread's scarce, and your fingers are better suited to plowing than sewing. Washing clothes is worse. Soap's a luxury you don't have. As you learned, splashing your face from that cracked jug in your hut when the stink gets unbearable. You drag your tunic to the river, kneeling on the bank to scrub it with a smooth stone or handful of ash. The icy water bites your knuckles, and the dirt clings like it's got a personal grudge. You hang the damp cloth by the hearth to dry, where it soaks up smoke, leaving you smelling like you slept in a chimney. Here's a quirky tidbit that might make you gag. Some peasants used stale urine to whiten their linen, believing it could bleach out stains when soap wasn't an option. It's a grim trick, collected in a pot and left to ferment, then sloshed over clothes like a medieval laundry hack. You imagine dunking your tunic in that foul brew, hoping for a miracle, and decide you'd rather live with the stains. It's a reminder of how far you are from a washing machine or a bottle of detergent, and you're starting to miss your modern closet more than ever. Grooming's no easier. You grab a bone comb, its teeth worn from years of use, and drag it through your hair, cursing as it snags on knots. Lice are a constant nuisance, and you've taken to rinsing your scalp in the river when the itching gets too bad. But it's a losing fight. Beards, if you have one, are trimmed with a dull knife, and washing is just a quick splash of cold water from the well. Your hands, cracked and calloused from the plow, tell the story of your life scars from a slipped sickle, burns from the hearth, dirt ground into every crease. You're not just dressed like a peasant. Your body wears the evidence of one. You stand, stretching your aching back, and glance at your family. Their clothes are just as ragged, their faces just as weathered, marked by the same labor that's left you with a limp from that ox cart mishap. Women might braid their hair or tie it under a headscarf, but there's no mirror, no makeup, no time for vanity. The Lord's knights, with their polished chainmail and dyed cloaks, look like they're from another world, while you're a walking testament to mud and sweat. Even children bear the marks: early scraped knees, sunburned cheeks, hands already tough from carrying water or gathering sticks. Your appearance isn't just about comfort. It's a badge of your place in the feudal pecking order. As you learned trudging past the manor house, the lord's fine robes and the priest's clean vestments scream status, while your threadbare tunic screams serf. You're tempted to joke that your only accessory is a layer of grime. But there's truth in it. Cleanliness is for those who don't spend their days wrestling oxen or dodging bandits. The physical toll of your life, from hunched shoulders to blistered feet, is a mirror of the fields you work, worn and unyielding. As you pull your cloak tighter, preparing for another trek to the fields, you feel the weight of this world's indifference to your comfort. Your clothes don't fit right. Your skin's raw, and your body's a map of survival. You're starting to miss the little things: a soft t-shirt, a hot shower, a pair of sneakers that don't leak. Here, you're dressed for endurance, not ease, and every itch reminds you of it. The day's stretching out, and there's more to face, like the back-breaking labor that never ends, piling onto a life that's already wearing you thin. You stumble out of your hut, the smoky air still clinging to your patched tunic, its itchy wool a constant reminder of the life you lead. Remember that moment in front of the pail, seeing your weathered face and scarred hands. Those are the marks of labor, etched deeper with every day you spend in the fields. The sun's barely up, painting the sky a pale gray. But you're already gripping your plow, the wooden handle worn smooth by years of sweat. There's no coffee to kickstart your morning. No weekend to look forward to, just another day of grinding work that never seems to end. Welcome to medieval peasant life, where labor isn't just a job. It's the chain that binds you to this muddy village. You trudge to the fields, your boots sinking into the damp earth, the same soil you've tilled since you were strong enough to hold a hoe. As a serf, your days revolve around the seasons: spring for sowing, summer for weeding, autumn for harvesting, winter for repairs. Today, you're plowing the Lord's land, a task that comes before your own tiny strip of barley, the one you checked anxiously yesterday. The plow, heavy and stubborn, fights you with every step. And the oxen, those beasts you've been shouting gee at since dawn, aren't exactly team players. Your back aches, your hands blister, and the sun climbs higher, turning the field into a furnace. You pause to wipe the sweat from your brow, glancing at the manor house in the distance, its walls mocking your toil. The Lord expects his fields done first, and you owe him days of labor, part of the deal for living on his land. As you learned, trudging past his nights. On top of that, there's the tax in grain or livestock, and the tithe to the church. That 10% you can't afford to spare, if you're lucky. You'll have enough left to feed your family. But lucky feels like a word from another language. You're tempted to joke that your only break is when the plow gets stuck. But even then, you're wrestling it free, cursing under your breath. Labor isn't just plowing. You harvest wheat with a sickle, the blade nicking your fingers if you're not careful, or thresh grain by beating it with a flail, your arms screaming for mercy. There's always something mending fences, like that wolf-scratched one you fixed, or hauling water from the well for the goats. Women in the village spin wool or churn butter, their hands as calloused as yours, while children gather firewood or chase birds from the crops. No one's exempt, not even the old, who limped through tasks like repairing nets or baskets. You're starting to miss your modern desk job, where a coffee break was a right, not a fantasy. Here's a quirky tidbit that might make you smirk. Some peasants used clappers, wooden noisemakers shaped like rattles, to scare birds away from ripening crops. Picture a kid or an elderly villager wandering the fields, shaking a clapper like a medieval maraca, hoping the sparrows get the hint. It's a simple trick, but it's one more task in a life where every minute is claimed. You imagine trying it yourself, your arms already numb from plowing, and decide you'd rather yell at the birds. It's one less thing to carry. It's a small glimpse into the endless ingenuity and exhaustion of survival. You keep plowing, the furrows stretching behind you like a map of your effort. But there's no sense of progress. The Lord's overseer rides by, his horse kicking up dust, and you feel his eyes on you, checking for slacking. Falling behind could mean a fine, or worse. A trip to the stocks, like that bread theft scene that still haunts you. You push harder, ignoring the ache in your shoulders, because stopping isn't an option if you're sick. As you feared with that cut from the plow handle, you work through it. If you're tired, you grit your teeth. The village depends on everyone pulling their weight. and the Lord doesn't care about your blisters. As noon approaches, you grab a hunk of that gritty bread from your sack, chewing it slowly to make it last. It's not lunch. It's fuel to keep you going until dusk, when you'll drag yourself home to collapse on your straw mattress, only to start again tomorrow. The physical toll is brutal. Your hands are cracked, your back's hunched, and that limp from an old cart accident flares up with every step. You're not just working, you're wearing yourself out, piece by piece, like a tool the Lord will use until it breaks. You're tempted to joke that your body's the real tax you pay, but the truth stings too much. The field stretches on, and you spot other villagers bent over their tasks, their silhouettes blurred by heat haze. There's a rhythm to this labor, a grim kind of unity, but it's not enough to lift the weight. You think of the minstrel's song from last night, a fleeting joy that feels like a lifetime ago, and realize those moments are what keep you sane, but they're rare, and work is eternal. The day's not over, and there's one final challenge to face the crushing weight of time itself, where every hour feels like a debt you can't pay, pushing you toward a reckoning with this unforgiving world. You collapse onto your straw mattress, the creak of the wooden frame barely registering as your aching muscles beg for rest. The endless plowing from earlier, that grueling dance with the oxen and the Lord's fields, has left you hollowed out, your patched tunic still damp with sweat. Remember that moment in the field, the sun climbing with no mercy. It's dusk now, the light fading through the smoke hole in your thatched roof. But there's no clock to tell you the hour, no calendar to mark the day. Time in this medieval village isn't something you measure, it's something you endure. A slow, heavy tide that drags you through life. Welcome to the Middle Ages, where every moment feels like a debt you'll never pay off. You lie there, listening to the distant toll of the church bell, its low clang marking vespers. The evening prayer you're too exhausted to attend. In your modern life, time is neat alarms, schedules, a watch ticking on your wrist. Here, it's a blur, guided by the sun's arc, the season's turn, and the church's rhythm. You wake when the rooster crows, work until the light fails, pray when the bells call. There's no 5-minute break or quitting time. Days blend into weeks, marked only by tasks sowing, reaping, mending that wolf-scratched fence you fixed days ago. You're tempted to joke that your only clock is the ache in your back, but it's too true to be funny. Time isn't just vague, it's cyclical, trapping you in a loop of labor and survival. Spring means planting, like that barley you've been nursing. Summer brings weeding. Autumn demands harvest. Winter forces repairs. Each season serves the Lord, the church, the village, leaving no room for your own dreams. You're a serf, bound to this land, as you learned passing the manor house, and time reinforces that bondage. Years pass, but nothing changes. Your children will plow the same fields, wear the same ragged tunics, pray the same prayers. The future isn't a goal, it's just more of today, stretching out like the muddy path to the fields. The church shapes a time as much as the seasons. Bells ring for matins at midnight, lauds at dawn, vespers at dusk, tying your life to God's schedule. The priest's sermons, like that one about sin you have heard, measure your days in sins and salvations, not hours. Holy days Easter. Michaelmas break the monotony, but they are the Lord's and church's days. not yours. You owe a tithe, that 10% of your crops, and labor for the Lord. As you've felt every aching step, time isn't yours to control. It's a leash held by those above you, and you're starting to miss your modern calendar, where a day off was yours to claim. Here's a quirky tidbit that might spark a faint smile. Some villages used candle clocks. Candles marked with notches to estimate time for tasks like night watches or communal work. Picture a flickering candle in the village square. Its wax dripping as you wait for the signal to start threshing. It's clever. But it's not for you. Your time is measured by the Lord's needs, not wax. You imagine lighting one in your hut, watching it burn, and realize it'd just remind you how little rest you get. It's a small glimpse into a world trying to tame time. But for you, it's as untamed as the wolves in the forest. You shift on the mattress, the straw poking through your tunic, and think of the village around you. Your neighbors are just as trapped, their lives ticking to the same relentless rhythm. The minstrel's song, that fleeting joy from the bonfire, feels like a lifetime ago, drowned out by the grind of plowing, the fear of bandits, the itch of your lice-ridden clothes, superstitions, like that toad's foot charm or the crow you fretted over, give you a flicker of control. But time doesn't care about your prayers or omens. It marches on, indifferent, and you're carried along, too tired to fight it. The psychological weight is crushing in your modern world. Time means progress, new jobs, new places, new goals. Here, it's stasis. You'll never leave this village, never read a book, never rise above your birth. As the feudal hierarchy taught you, every day mirrors the last. And hope feels like a luxury you can't afford. Like soap or a clean tunic, you're tempted to joke that time's your real lord, more demanding than the one in the manor house. But the thought lands heavy, like the dirt under your nails. As the hut darkens, you hear your family's soft breathing, a reminder of why you endure. You've survived 24 hours, dodged disease, bandits, the overseer's wrath, but it's not a victory. It's just the start of another day, another cycle of labor, fear, and faith. You close your eyes, the bells echo fading, and let the exhaustion pull you under. You're back in your modern bed, the medieval world slipping away like a dream. But its weight lingers. You wouldn't last 24 hours. Not because you're weak, but because this world doesn't let you rest. Sleep now, safe in your own time, and be glad you're only visiting. And close your eyes. You are sleeping well.